Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter, or you can subscribe here to the channel and hit that notifications button and get a new notification whenever a new video is uploaded. Before we get into it, I have just done another video, a breakdown of Anthony Yarde and his display against Tyron, and if there's anything that we can learn from it. Was there anything that he was trying in there that was a little bit different? Are we seeing any tweaks at all? Obviously, he was in there with an opponent who was poor, but is there anything we could learn from it? And what was the point of that fight? There's also a discussion of Nathan Heaney and his strengths and weaknesses, and the same with George the Sensation Bance, the prospect, and we talk a little bit about Heaney's beef with Florian Marcoux as well. So check out that video. And at the start of that video, I did a couple of plugs. One of them was for Callum Newbold. He is a man who has created this new introduction of mine. So if you like the introduction and you're looking to hire somebody perhaps for a website of your own, you can check out the link in the description box of this video. He didn't want anything in return from me. He's just looking to build his portfolio, so it was very nice of him. Thank you once again, Callum, as I said in the last video. So check out the link in the description box below. There's also a video that I've done which is very, very different to anything I've done before. Fury Wilder 3, the warnings of Ajax, Icarus and Hubris. Very, very different, but I do really want honest feedback, so please check that out. Now let's talk a little bit about Jake Paul and that undercard. We'll start off talking about Jake Paul, and then we'll talk a little bit about Fury as well, Tommy Fury and Daniel Dubois. With regards to Jake Paul, I thought the right man won the fight. I thought it was 5 rounds to 3 to Jake Paul. I felt that Woodley was far too slow in getting started. He gave up the first 3 rounds, to be honest with you. In MMA, in the UFC, in an octagon, because it's a circle and it's so big, it's an octagon, it's not a circle, because it's so big and it's completely different to a small squared circle that a ring is. The way in which you cut off an opponent is entirely different. The way you cut off an opponent in a boxing ring would not work in an octagon, okay? Because the corners aren't as pronounced. It is circular really in its fashion, and it's large. So if you see a guy circling out this way and you try to step in front of him that way, he can literally change direction again. There's no corner, there's no right angle which will cut him off. So it's an entirely different method of movement. And so what you see sometimes is MMA fighters that move over, one of the things they struggle with is that cutting off the ring. And you saw Woodley was just following the guy around, wasn't really doing much. Now he can be a little bit like this in the UFC too, waiting for his moment. But of course he's looking to strike and he's looking to time him. But if you're going to take the center of the ring and look to pressure a guy, you have to put him in a situation where he's uncomfortable. Now for the first 3 rounds, Jake Paul wasn't being made to work at all really. He was moving around the ring comfortably and just popping a jab. And you heard from the corner, BJ Flores was shouting, 1-2, Klitschko, Klitschko. Now, he wasn't fighting like Klitschko really, because he was moving around the ring. He wasn't holding center ring and then trying to land that 1-2 and then tie up. He wasn't willing to do that. He was keeping shots straight, and he was basically saying the onus is on you to come and close the range, and Woodley was incapable of doing that, or unwilling to do that. Sonny Edwards has said that he didn't even try to win. I'm not going to make those accusations here. I will confess that there were points in the first 3 rounds where I thought, what is he doing here? Is he even, is he trying to win this? What is going on here? First 2 or 3, when did the knockdown happen? Basically, it should have been a knockdown. It should have been a knockdown. There was one point finally where Woodley landed a big right hand, and the ropes held Jake Paul up. Now that should be a 10-8 round. Okay, the referee didn't give it as a knockdown. And we're talking the middle rope. He was lying practically horizontal on it. It kept him up. It was a knockdown, but it didn't count as one. That changed the fight a little bit. Woodley then started coming back into it, but even then he wasn't putting enough pressure. Personally, the way I see it, the way I saw it during the fight too, is when Jake Paul was coming forward and trying to lean into shots, make the fight, trying to start to trigger things, he was falling short a little bit. He was overstretching a little bit. He was shifting that weight over the front foot a little bit too much. And right at the start of the 3rd round, he tries to come in with a low shot to the body, and you see him do it, and he gets countered. And so what I wanted Woodley to do, and I said this prior to seeing that, by the way, I was on the Discord, Hatman's Discord, and we were all talking about it. I wanted to see him get on the back foot and lure Jake Paul in. I wanted to I wanted him to make Jake Paul come to him. There's no point in holding centre ring when the other guy's got a reach advantage and you're not coming close to him. Because he'll just stay at range and say, okay, stay there and I'll just pop you from range. Right? You've either got to cut him down, which obviously is not part of Woodley's game, or move back and make him come to you. And then when he's coming to you, change the speed in which you go from back to forward quickly. Lure him in. Now, he did come in low early on Woodley, which I liked that. He should have kept that going, but while on the back foot. Because by coming in low, you're forcing Jake Paul, who's not that experienced, to punch down, which closes that range, okay? And that's what we should have seen a lot more of. Him doing things like that, in my opinion, luring him in for those big over-the-top right hands. Instead, he started to punch with Jake Paul, which brought some success, and he landed that big right hand, hurt Jake Paul. He wasn't able to capitalize on it because Jake did get on the back foot again. And at that point, when he is in survival mode, there's no point in you trying to lure him in anymore. You lure him in until you hurt him. Once you hurt him, go after him. And it was at that point that Woodley's footwork wasn't great, in my opinion. He wasn't able to cut off the ring like he should have. And Jake Paul was able to escape with the win. I believe that Woodley saw enough there to, when he was talking about a rematch at the end of it, he was probably serious about it. Jake Paul said, if you get a tattoo of I love Jake Paul on your leg, then you can have the rematch. And you heard Woodley say, fine, okay, you'll see. Don't run from me when you do. But when I do. But here's the thing. He's got to understand, he's not dealing with a professional fighter here. He's dealing with a professional troll. Jake Paul's not fighting Woodley again. What's going to happen is Woodley's going to get a tattoo of I love Jake Paul. And then Jake Paul's going to spend the next 3 years mocking him, telling him I'm in your head. I already beat you. I don't need to fight you. I'm moving on to bigger and badder things. And you'd have had a tattoo with nothing in return. That's what Jake Paul's about. In Woodley's mind, he's thinking like a fighter. If I jump through hoops and put you in a position where you can't possibly avoid me, the world will know you're ducking. But, which is embarrassing for a fighter. It's cowardly, right? Jake Paul doesn't think like that. Jake Paul just wants to troll. So I don't think we'll see this fight again. I think we'll probably see him fight Tommy Fury next. In terms of sheer build-up, I'd like to see him fight Dylan Dennis. You're talking about two fantastic trolls in that regard. The banter and the build-up to that will be sensational. So I'd love to see that, but as far as I know, Dennis is predominantly a grappler. I'm not sure in the ring how good that fight would be, but the build-up would be incredible. Now, Dennis, though, does seem to have a bit of a screw loose. I wouldn't be surprised if he's losing a striking fight, if he decides to go for a two-legged takedown and start grounding and pounding. So it's one of those where it would capture the imagination, in my opinion. But I think Tommy Fury's the more likely fighter, the more likely opponent. And Tommy didn't put in a great display last night at all. He fought a guy who was much smaller. And this is what I was talking about before, that I liked what Woodley was doing by coming in lower. Sometimes it's harder to fight a guy who's smaller than you and you're not used to. When you're used to punching up or you're used to punching at the same height as yourself, when you then have to punch considerably lower, the way in which you generate the momentum to throw the shot is different. The way in which you generate power is different. Your body dynamics are different. You're also giving up reach in order to produce that power. If you do want to punch at range without giving out reach, you have to crouch too, in which case sometimes that can affect your mobility because your stance widens, right? And talking of stance widening, by the way, BJ Flores, who long-time subscribers will know I've had a bit of an argument with in the past, but I have to give him props here, BJ, because he gave some really good advice at one point. He told ahead of the last round, Jake Paul, to narrow his stance. In other words, narrow your stance, move around more, and make Woodley come to you. It became quite evident that Woodley was incapable of closing the ring off in the way that he should have. And BJ spotted that and gave the correct advice. So they are doing a great job with Jake Paul. You know, I know, listen, I've been very critical of YouTube boxers in the past. But a lot of that is YouTube boxing in general. All the guys that have attached themselves to the Paul brothers. Okay, you know how you saw, I can't remember this guy's name, but there was one guy who fought another YouTuber. And he was trying to fight like Mike Tyson, a peekaboo style, when he was coming in low. And I promise you, he was crouching. He was doing like squats. And crouching, it looked like his bum was going to hit the floor. That's how low he was coming. I'm sitting there thinking, what is this dude doing? He's about to get killed. And I noticed it within 10 seconds because he didn't know what he was doing. It was terrible, and he did indeed get stopped. That's what I have no time for. With someone like Jake Paul, he is genuinely applying himself. And you've got to respect the hustle. You know, I know a lot of fighters don't like seeing him fighting big names and getting these big pay-per-views because he hasn't earned it. And in many respects, he hasn't earned it in a boxing ring. But you've got to respect the hustle. This is a guy that's out there putting out rap tunes and stuff. He's hardly an elite level rapper either, is he? But he's finding a way to make that bag, as the phrase goes. So, you know, you've got to respect him, but he is applying himself. He's not just trying to con the public. He does seem to be working very, very hard. And for a guy that had never put on a pair of gloves up until 2-3 years ago, he's actually doing very well. And it's a bit of a damning indictment when a former world champion of the UFC is performing in that manner. Now, long-time subscribers will know, way before I even started boxing as a kid, I was doing first karate and then kickboxing. So I'm not one of these people that's hating on MMA. You put these guys in a cage and anything goes. Trust me, Woodley's going to destroy Jake Paul. So I'm not trying to undermine their fighting ability at all. But unfortunately, the strikers that have come across have either not been well prepared or of a certain age or just not particularly suited to boxing. Okay, so it'll be interesting to see if, you know, if the UFC does. So, I mean, Amanda Serrano's, she was on the card. She's somebody that's come over to boxing and she looks very, very good. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see if there are any more sort of UFC fighters coming over to boxing and giving it a shot. Masvidal made a comment whereby he was saying how Woodley is not a fantastic striker. He's a wrestler who has good striking for a wrestler. Now, Jake Paul was talking about Masvidal. Masvidal, who is a striker, would have to win that fight. Otherwise, it would look really bad on the UFC. But moving on from that, talking of Tommy Fury, Tommy didn't look great. That height dynamic, like I said, going back to that, it did affect him. And he struggled. There was a lot of tying up. You know, he's got very, very long arms, unusually long arms. And when you've got very long arms, sometimes it can be very awkward to try and punch when someone's right up close to you. But he doesn't use his reach as effectively as he should. He's a good mover, fairly good mover. You would assume naturally he can move a little bit. But he gives it up. He gives it up. And he's still learning on the job. I get that. I'm interested in this fight from a technical perspective, stylistic perspective. It's interesting because they both move fairly well. I think Jake Paul hits harder. I think that the stamina definitely belongs to Tommy Fury. I think Tommy Fury's definitely got a lot of heart. We don't yet know about Jake Paul. He was in survival mode yesterday. It took him a long time to recover from that big shot as well. I don't think Tommy Fury's a big puncher though. Would he be able to hurt Jake Paul as much as Woodley did? Now, one thing I do believe Tommy Fury would do is if Jake Paul's hurt, he'd be able to sustain the attack a lot better than Woodley did. He'd be able to cut the ring off and get close to him and really put him under pressure. So it could be sloppy, but yeah, he could end up putting him under a lot of pressure. So it's interesting. It's a couple of novices that are still learning their trade. And it's a fight that I'd like to see. It's an interesting fight. It's not necessarily a pay-per-view fight for the hardcore boxing fans, of course. But yeah, it's interesting. In terms of Daniel Dubois, you know, Daniel, for me, last night, he was exercising demons. He got caught with a couple of flush right hands. And he paused. He didn't jump straight in after that. So I think they affected him. And Joker Samano is a big man who was game in terms of throwing shots with Daniel. But he was vastly overmatched. And so there was a real gap in ability here. But Daniel was almost impatient, overloading at times. And I think a lot of that was to do with exercising those demons after the Joe Joyce fight. You know, the two right hands that caught him flush as well, they caught him on the side of the eye that's been damaged. So there would have been some tentative elements there for him, wondering, am I ready to take these shots? Am I okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Let me jump back in. So to me, he was exercising demons. I'm not going to be too harsh on judging him or anything like that. We'll learn more about Daniel Dubois moving forward. He seemed very excited about getting the victory. Against this level of opponent, you wouldn't expect that typically from Daniel Dubois, which suggests that this wasn't to do with the magnitude of the victory, but rather the demons that he was exercising himself. He certainly looked a lot more trim. But like I said, from an in-ring perspective, we still have a lot to learn before Daniel gets back into the ring. Before Daniel gets back into a guy that the level of Joe Joyce. He's been calling out Trevor Bryant, so they're clearly looking to go down that route to try and win a world title with that route, which is fine. I'm fine with that. You know, you have to understand the Joe Joyce fight was nip and tuck before Daniel was unable to continue. He was unable to continue, whichever way you cut it. Even if you say he quit, fine. It was still a nip and tuck fight. Do you see what I'm saying? So his level is still there. But the question is, how much higher can he possibly go? Is he still there? Because the level's there, but does the psychological damage hold him back? And was he able to exercise those demons last night? Thanks for watching, everyone. Let me know what you think. How do you think a Jake Paul Tommy Fury fight would go? Do you think a Dylan Dennis fight would be very exciting? If not, who would you want to see Jake Paul fight next if you are interested in that at all? I know they're novices, but these novices are generating a lot of interest, and like I said, you have to respect someone who's taking it seriously. He just happens to be marrying it with some really good hustle along the way. And let me know what you thought about Daniel Dubois as well. Do you think that Daniel is merely exercising demons, or maybe you disagree with me? Maybe you don't think he was rushing his work. Maybe you think he looked brilliant. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching, everyone. Chat to you soon. Take care. God bless.